Hey, Giants fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to Talk is Cheap podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the New York Giants. Now, before we begin, I wanted to remind you that you can read our content on NJ.com/Giants and make sure to bookmark that to get the latest Giants news and analysis. Today, I'm joined by Giants beat reporter Darryl Slater. I mean, at this point, I could record my voice and just say what the outcome of the games are now, but guess what? The Giants lost. This time ways to win. The Giants continue to find new ways to win, this time losing to the New Orleans Saints at home. And we're going to get to that in a second. But first off, Darryl, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Chris. Much better than Brian Dable and Joe Shane, though that's a low bar to clear.
Now, I don't know. I forget any. Like, I know they have burn cream. Like, say if you put your hand on the stove or whatever and something happens, you got that cream on there. His butt must be burning because he's on a hot seat right now, but given on the way this team is playing and the outcomes that continue to go on. But we'll get into that all in a later on in the show. But I want to start out with something unique, something that you don't typically. Sometimes you see it during political seasons with planes flying around the stadium saying endorse this candidate A, endorse candidate B, or whatever prop vote is up there. But there's something that came around that, it's a legitimate question, I think, especially given the current status of the Giants. And if you don't want to say this, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it says, John Mara, please fix this dumpster fire. So, Darryl, I'm going to ask you the same online. Will John Mara be able to fix this dumpster fire? And do you have confidence that he'll be able to?
No, I mean, I don't know why anyone should, quite frankly. I mean, you're talking about an owner here, and of course, the Tisch family involved as co owners that has whiffed now on six straight hires. When you talk about four coaches and two GMs, the GMs, of course, Dave Gettleman, Joe Shane, and Ben McAdoo, coaches being Ben McAdoo, Pat Shermer, Joe Judge, and now Brian Dable. And it's pretty clear. I mean, that this team 2-11, eight straight losses, 8-22. Since the start of last year, they're about to tie their franchise record 9-game losing streak next week against the Ravens. There's no way they're beating them at home. And they go to Atlanta after that to try to avoid the all-time worst 10-game losing streak. I think that this team could lose out, could be 2-15, be the second worst season in franchise history, worst since '66 when they went 1-12-1. And look, I mean, in that all happening in the 100th season of Giants football, where John Mara was, wanted a good, obviously wants a good showing every year, but this is an embarrassing result in a historic season. And yeah, so I'm sure he's going to be mad. I'm sure he's going to be frustrated, but what is he going to do about it? Is he going to take it out on this regime, which would be certainly a well-deserved firing for both Brian Dable and Joe Shane? But again, it gets back to looking ahead. Can he actually get the right people in? And I don't think Giants fans should really, quite frankly, have any confidence that he can. I mean, they hired Tom Coughlin in 2004, and he was around through 2015. They promoted Jerry Reese from within, an Ernie Accorsi disciple, and that combination obviously led them to two Super Bowl championships and great hires. But they have not done or promotions in their case of Reese. They have not done anything over the last decade in terms of obviously results on the field, but also hiring anyone of any level of competence. And so, yeah, I think not the Giants fans have any choice. They have to trust Mara. It's not like he's going to hand the franchise over or sell the franchise, but yeah, you should not have a lot of confidence given recent results. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you look at Tom Coughlin's the last guy, in my opinion, that I feel comfortable enough with that he's had a solid foundation. He actually saw a bright future with. I look back even with you look at Shane, you look at hires like even Gettleman, you look at so many of these guys, McAdoo. I mean, a lot of these guys, they show promise early and they fizzle out. There's nothing sustaining in. Who would have thought you'd kind of be yearning more for the Gettleman days? Because at least you get some lasting draft picks. I think Malik Neighbors is going to come down to being Shane's best pick, and he had to be that bad in order to get him. So I don't know what it is. I hope they don't use the whole let's hire an outside outside firm to find our coach. Because as much as you hear coaches being CEO types, there's a lot more that goes into that, way more in terms of that. And I'm a little worried. And this thing could last in my 3-4 years more of this because you just can't pick the right people. It's an art form. I just don't know what he has to do in order to find it. I'll say this: if you were John Mara, what are you doing? Who's a guy? What do you think was the best mold to fit into for this team, general manager wise and coaching wise?
Well, I think they need to figure out whether Bill Belichick is even an option or whether he goes to North Carolina, and looking like probably North Carolina at this point, though that's not set. Um, you talk about guys like Ray Agnew from the Lions, who will be a candidate, no doubt, if they move on from Joe Shane. I think it's certainly possible they keep Joe Shane and move on from Brian Dable, and let Joe Shane draft the next quarterback. Now, how much of a package deal do they view the Dable and Shane as? That will be a question that this ownership group and John Mara and Steve Tisch will have to ask themselves. Again, the results on the field and certainly in terms of talent acquisition have been poor. Does that mean that Joe Shane won't make the right decision on the quarterback? I mean, it's if you have a number one pick, it's really it's not a no brainer. I think that they probably wind up taking Shedeur Sanders, but there are some draft analysts who think Cam Ward is better, or that they're close, and that there is a decision there to be had. So do you trust this general manager to make the right decision given all of his draft errors? And we did a big story on that this past week. That was a certain one of the topics in there, and among the others being how unfortunate it is for the Giants. They picked a really bad year to really need a quarterback. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, this is not a great quarterback draft class. The other thing that comes into play is if you clean house and you bring in a new GM and a new coach, say Ray Agnew and Ben Johnson, right? The Lions pairing there, of course. Um, do you draft a quarterback now, or do you look and or do you wait? Do you get a bridge guy? Do you sign Sam Darnold? Do you wait? This new regime would obviously not be on the hot seat in year one, but you're bringing in a coach ultimately who can mold your next quarterback whenever that quarterback arrives. Now, the 2026 class is not right now looking great for quarterbacks. You got Arch Manning probably in 2027, but again, that's you can't really look at it like that. It's really hard for an owner to look at it and say, "Oh, we're just going to bite the bullet for 2 more years after being so bad." I mean, the Giants have been so bad in 9 of 11 seasons with double-digit losses, including 7 of the last 8. At the of course 11 of 13 seasons out of the playoffs with one playoff win since the 2011 Super Bowl championship. So if you're John Mara, I think that ultimately you're probably telling whoever your GM and coach is that, okay, you're drafting a quarterback here, and we'll see how Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward would work out in New York. That's a big question. No one can say for sure. You're not talking about an Andrew Luck type prospect or even Trevor Lawrence, even though Trevor Lawrence has not wound up being great. So yeah, I think you there's plenty of GMs you could look at non Belichick wise, whether that's Ray Agnew or Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs or someone like that. Now, do you want your GM and coach to have a relationship like this GM and coach did? That obviously has not come to fruition in terms of good results just because they happen to work together with the Bills. And one guy happened to mold a quarterback and one guy happened to be part of picking a quarterback in Josh Allen. So um, it's there's no easy answers here. And then you look at the fact that the Giants are not a quarterback away. They're absolutely not. Look at this roster. I mean, Malik Neighbors is a nice welcoming piece for whoever the new quarterback will be, whether that's a bridge guy like Sam Darnold or the draft pick. But the line is a disaster. I mean, still. So yeah, there are no easy solutions here. I don't think anyone is delusional enough to think that Shedeur Sanders is going to come in here and fix everything. Certainly not immediately.
You make some very good points there. And beforehand, after they released Daniel Jones, which with not hitting on him just sets you back so much now. And I'll explain why in a sec. For not, I used to think that if you're going to need a bridge quarterback, you need to get a veteran guy to bring it in there. But as you mentioned, it's going to take a while to fix all these needs that you have and to be competitive again if you want to go to the playoffs or beyond. So I'm looking at guys like Justin Fields potentially. The reason why I say that is I've talked to a couple personnel guys and looking at this year's draft, not only this year's draft, but the 2026 draft, they're not really high on a lot of quarterback prospects that are out there right now. Unless somebody decides to have a big leap this summer, there's not a lot of depth that they're thinking currently right now that position. And that's gotta be scary if you're the Giants, if you're following the Giants, because if you don't, since you missed on Daniel Jones, since now you got to hope that, okay, maybe Shedeur Sanders, maybe Cam Ward, and the fact you have to say maybe with all these guys, the draft picks and nobody pans out, i.e., look at Bryce Young, where have you, but that they have even more questions that are attached to them. Now you're like, okay, we don't hit on this. we're 3 years from now, you're going to be stuck in the same situation that you are right now, and it's just it's a bad thing. And I'm almost at a point now. When it comes to Belichick, I think he'd be intrigued. I think he'd definitely keep them in the running to get a better job. Maybe he goes to North Carolina. Maybe he says, you know what? Forget this. I don't want to deal with this. I want to go the old school way. I want to be like my dad, build up a roster from there on the college level, and just go from there. But whoever they bring in, they need to A, have some discipline to them. B, be willing and patient enough to build something that's sustaining, because you can't keep going, oh, hey, 1 year. Hey, we snuck in the playoffs. Okay, we won a game. Okay, good. Now we're back to where we are, square one. Easier said than done. And find somebody that's lasting. Maybe you have to go coach first, a high quality guy who showed maybe he had a college experience, that have built a program together, and then you get the experienced GM to find the players that help them out with that. Maybe that's the way to go. But all of it it's a very tough decisions that Mara are going to have to make. And yeah, I'm not so sure he's going to be able to make the right ones as of right now. You prove me wrong. I wish he prove me wrong. I'm at that point now when it comes to that. Now we're going to go switch gears now, more on the field. We're talking about that 14-11 loss now. And it's another loss here at MetLife Stadium. Now, I know, especially this Giants team is expected to struggle this year. And wins were going to come at a premium no matter what. But you think home would be an easier place to play as opposed to being going on the road in that one, too. The Giants are 0-7. They haven't won a game at MetLife this year. Like, you think you could trip into one. And they got one block back into their face last Sunday. Why is it so tough to play at MetLife Stadium for this team?
Because they're terrible. I think that's all it is. I don't think it has anything to do with the stadium. The stadium is obviously an awful stadium, but the team stinks. I mean, they have not gone winless at home. They're 0-7 at home. They have not gone winless at home since 1974, when they finished 2-12, and that year they played 7 home games, so they went 0-7. Obviously, 14-game season, played 7 home games, 0-7. Their home field that year was actually the Yale Bowl up in Yale in
Yeah.
Connecticut, and that was because Giant Stadium, the old Giant Stadium, was being built, and it I get the Giants played. I'm looking at the history now. The Giants played at Shea Stadium in '75. New Giant Stadium opened in '76, and they were at the Yale Bowl while they were waiting for that to be built. Anyway, so it's 1974, 50 years ago. That's the last time they didn't win a home game. Now 0-7 at home is obviously terrible, but you know 0-9 at home would be something else entirely, and that they are staring down that possibility. They're not going to beat the Ravens this week. They might not beat a Colts team that could be in the mix for a playoff spot in Week 17. So yeah, I mean, it just comes down to that. They're just a bad team. I mean, this is also one of the things that could really push John Mara and Steve Tisch over the edge into firing this regime, which is they hate the embarrassment of having apathy. And so it's one thing to have fans angry and booing. It's another thing to have fans not showing up, which was the case last week when the get-in price on the secondary market was $1. It's going to be the case again this week when the stadium will have a lot of people in it, but a lot of them are going to be Ravens fans who made the trip up 95 for this game. So those are terrible optics for an owner who, now all owners, all owners care about this, of course, and John Mara does especially, of having apathy, of having empty seats, of certainly having the plane fly over the stadium, for goodness sake, as bringing back memories in 1978. And of course, that spurred on that, sparked the Giants to Wellington Mara, of course, at the time, to hire George Young, which was a huge turning point, to hire Ray Perkins, who had Bill Belichick on his first staff and wound up bringing Bill Parcells into the fold. And so that plane flight in 78, big turning, flight, the plane circling Old Giant Stadium in 78, towing that banner, 15 years of lousy football was what it said. And really, this Giant organization is now on 13 years of mostly lousy football, starting with 2012. And so it's that all over again. It's the 70s all over again, and the late 60s all over again for this organization. And so John Mara remembers that. I mean, the man's 70 years old. He just turned 70. So he was a grown man, I guess. In 78, I'd have to do the math on that. But yeah, so he remembers that. He remembers the embarrassment of that. And he remembers certainly so he was 24 years old in 78. So he remembers the Uh, uh, my math is wrong there. 74. Yeah, 78. Okay, I'm getting it. And then he was 20 and 74 when the last time they went winless at home. So there you go. I mean, he was certainly right in the mix of being involved in his family's business, or at least to some level back then, or at least cognizant of what was going on with the embarrassment of 74, the embarrassment of 78 and throughout the 70s. And he doesn't want to go back to that. And there have been times here where late in the Pat Shermer era, when the people were not showing up, and that team started 2-11 also. It's like, oh man, Giants are 2-11. When's the last time they started 2-11? 2019. It was only 5 years ago. That's how bad that this stretch has been. You look at, okay, they're 2-11 right now. I mean, just it goes right on top of all of the other terrible starts that they've had. Now, you can't even call them starts. 2-8 last year, 2-11 this year, 2-6 in 2021, 1-7 in 2020, 2-11 in 2019, 1-7 in 2018, and then in 2017 they were 2-13 before they got their third win, which was in the finale, and um, they barely avoided a 2-14 season. So back when there were 16 games. So yeah, I mean, John Mara is I don't know if sensitive would be the right word, but he's attuned to the optics of not just booing, not just fan anger, but fan apathy and empty seats, and how awful of a look that is when the people just quit on a regime, as the fans have here, when the get in price is $1. Like these are embarrassing things for a proud guy, albeit one who's made many many bad decisions that have led to this point, right? So that's where he stands on this. I think that I wrote this leading into the game. Could the apathy, they start Drew Lock and not the fan favorite Tommy DeVito against the Saints. And I wrote leading into the game, also in signs point to just an enormous amount of apathy in this game. And there was. At the end of the game, when it was still a game, there was nobody left pretty much, except Saints fans, Giants fans had pretty much all left. And there were cheers when that field goal was blocked. And I think one of the reasons maybe some Giants fans were like, yeah, first pick. It was largely because there were a lot of Saints fans, okay? Saints fans in that stadium cheering that way. So when you hear those cheers, okay, I'm sure there were some Giants fans cheering, but if you looked around, there were a lot of darn Saints fans in there. Okay, like I'm sorry, but you walk around Manhattan, I don't see a lot of Florida Lee or whatever logos, on people, right? So however many Saints fans there weren't a lot, but anyway. There, it was a decent portion of whoever was left in that stadium at the end of what was still a game. The Giants almost forced overtime. Again, meaningless game, meaningful only for the number one draft pick. And they're at 2 right now. So that's something to watch at least.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 2-11 right now. They do have the second pick. They're tied with the Las Vegas Raiders, who also are 2-11. You know what? They almost got some help. Carolina almost won that game, and in New England, they helped them out as well too. So Jacksonville as well too. They're helping themselves out too. So the Giants are still in a good position. But it's funny you mentioned that. I was going to bring that up too when you mentioned there's tickets that were $1, and I saw somewhere as post. I was like, wait, what's going on here? You literally. And somebody showed the price of a beer. It was like $13 for like a regular can of beer. So the fact that you can get a group rate, you can get 13 tickets for the same price of a beer. Yeah, apathy says so much. And we always hear the best way to get an owner's attention is to not spend their money and
Yep.
just leave it out. And he's got to be when he gets that report. And I'm pretty sure they get it like every day, like an executive report, just going, "Hey, what do we do? Okay, we started this in merchandise, this and tickets, parking, what have you." Yeah, it starts to add up, and whatever that gate is, they're getting it, and they're looking at. I wonder how much Mara is mumbling under his breath, like, "What is going on? Like, this is bad. It's bad on terms of that." Now I got another question as well too. I mean, we were talking earlier about just the overall Giant situation and trying to attract a coach. Well, the team they share with the stadium with the Jets, they're also going to be looking at that because I don't foresee them keeping Jeff Ulbrich and taking the interim tag off and making him the head coach. They're going to be out there searching. Do you think the Giants' job is a better job than the Jets or not? What's your
No,
opinion on that?
I mean, well, okay. So look at it like this: which roster is more talented? There's no doubt the Jets have a more talented roster. I mean, Garrett Wilson, more proven player than Malik Neighbors. I mean, he's still doing really good things despite poor quarterback play and inconsistency. Um, and for all anyway. But yeah, Sauce Gardner is a foundational player. He's not having a very good year. But the roster is better. The Jets roster is better. They have aging pieces that they have to move on from. Obviously, they were an all-in team this year. But again, that's a low bar. The Giants have one of the worst rosters in the league. So yeah, the Jets roster is better. The Jets will be going like into full rebuild mode next year, obviously. And the Giants, the reality is whether they bring back this regime or not with a high draft pick quarterback, they're still going to be in rebuild mode. So um, yeah, I think the Jets is a better spot. Now, look, who's the quarterback? That's what that's what the Giants can sell. They can sell. We have the number one pick. Come coach whichever quarterback we prefer. Now, again, it's not an Andrew Luck year. It's not a Trevor Lawrence year. It's not it's not like one of these shoe-in, definitely great quarterbacks. So, but again, they're going to find someone to take the job. I mean, someone will some offensive minded guy probably, if they fire Brian Dable, will be interested in coming to coach a high draft pick quarterback and getting a chance to mold that guy. But the big thing with the Jets, obviously, on the other side of things, we talk about John Mara's flaws. One reason why the Jets are unattractive, they're certainly their roster is attractive. They're at seventh pick right now, so they're not going to get most likely Shador Sanders or Cam Ward. Those guys are probably going to be gone unless the Jets somehow trade up, which I don't know if they even have the capital to do that. Could they sign a bridge guy? I don't know. Hey, Sam Darnold, maybe. But
Oh, that would be great.
so look, the Woody Johnson factor is a big negative for the Jets. So that's what makes maybe the Giant job more attractive. When you balance out like really high draft pick, maybe number one, number two, versus Woody Johnson on the negative side, I do wonder, even though the Jet roster is better, if the Giants job is more attractive, just because Woody Johnson is such an absolute disaster as an owner. Rampant ineptitude. I mean, years and years of this. The guy has no idea what he's doing. I mean, just the impulsiveness of the way he handled the Saleh firing, and then the terrible hires he's made over the years, and his involvement in things, and wanting to bench Aaron Rodgers. I mean, come on, the guy is absolutely clueless. Like now, John Mara has made decisions that make him basically look like Woody Johnson without a lot of the clown show stuff. Because the bottom line is results, and neither of these franchises are producing results. Is John Mara a little bit more, I don't know, like polished in terms of not looking like a complete fool? Sure, but the results make him look foolish. So, especially when he comes out at 2-5 after you get destroyed at home by Saquon Barkley and the Eagles, and you say, "Oh, we're not going to make any changes during the season." Why do you need to say that? Like, no one asked you to say that. And we're not. We think we're going. We don't anticipate making any changes after the season. Okay, you know, 6 straight losses later. Again, they were 2-5 at that point. They had just gotten destroyed by the Eagles. No one was asking him. He didn't need to do that. It makes him look ridiculous. Um, and 6 straight losses later, including winnable games, Panthers in Munich, the Bucks game where they lose by 23 after trailing 23-0 at the half. It's 4 straight games now. Carolina, Tampa, Dallas, New Orleans, all winnable games. Lost them all. Lost them all. So anyway, but yeah, which job is more attractive? I don't know. I guess maybe the Giants. And now that I'm like talking my way through it, even though the Jets have a better roster, Giants will have a better quarterback pick, and they have an owner who is, look, Woody Johnson's like a bottom 5 NFL owner. John Mara's success has been few and almost non-existent recently, right? So, but he has a track record of competence. So he has flaws, no doubt, but they're not Woody Johnson level flaws. So I wonder how much that will play into things, because that's who you're coming to work for. You're coming to work for an owner, and are you going to want to work for an owner that has as many publicly revealed warts as Woody Johnson has? So that's something that certainly will play into it. And on the other hand, I mean, if they keep Joe Shane, where the Jets is a full house cleaning, right? So it's a clean slate. That's a pretty attractive scenario for a coach. It's less attractive when you retain a hot CGM and you're telling the coach, "Oh, come on in, work with this guy who's delivered an abominable roster." So
Yeah, Devin Singletary is better than Saquon Barkley. Yeah, well, we can get by. He won't do that. Just see that. See, when I look at it, I look at yeah. I think the Giants do have it. Well, just for the simple fact, when it came to the reports that came out with the Jets and Woody's calling everybody in and reportedly telling people, okay, hey, play this person, don't play this person. Yeah, nah, that's to have that level meddling. It's almost like the Cowboys and Jerry Jones, and we see how successful that's going over in the last few years in terms of playoff success and everything else. They seem to win the regular season games, except for this year. But you see what happens with that, and the Jets just seem the best thing about the Jets is their practice facility. I hate to say it, it is they stadium like they can't put a decent consistent product out in the field. It's just so rough when you look at everything there even years where they're expected to have a good year and they get all this talent around them on those, especially on the offensive side of the ball and offense and to complement defense, it falls apart and it just looks so bad. And you're always, listen, the Jets are always going to play second field to the Giants in that town unless something really, really good happens. The Giants really, truly fall off. And they seem to fall off at the same time every single year. So the Giants have that going for them but it's not a lot. You take what you can. It's one of those things. You take what you can get, and you'll be happy with it. So I think they run with that, and yeah, there's that one little silver lining for Giants fans that are listening out there. At least you have that. You have a better situation than Jets. Perfect. Well, I guess we do have to talk about football at some point here. There is a game. What you mentioned, the Ravens are coming up to MetLife to take on the Giants. And there's still questions about whether Drew Lock, if he's going to play or not. And that means you go Tommy DeVito. Do you go elsewhere? What are you looking at? There's not much you can take out of this because just basically you're full on Sherman in the tank watch and get down. But what can you take out of this game, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just think if you get a competitive effort from the Giants, maybe you take that as a good sign. If you're John Mara and Steve Tisch, there's no world in which they're winning this game. You know, the Giants are beat up, beaten down, and playing one of the best quarterbacks of the generation. Right? So, other than that, they got a great chance. You know, like so. Look, and another, and yeah, and so it's an awful situation. Um, they're not going to win the game. Like, so, what is the environment going to be like in terms of a lot of Ravens fans? I'm sure, but yeah, they'll I think they're just looking for a competitive effort. I think they are looking for effort period from their players. Um, yeah, and a decent result in a loss, which will tie the all-time worst losing streak in franchise history, which they set in 1976, and they tied it in 2019. So I don't know if a good effort will be much consolation for John Mayer and Steve Tisch, but yeah, I think that that's sort of the best the Giants can really hope for in this game. Again, there's no way they're winning it. I don't care who the quarterback is; it's irrelevant. But the Lamar Jackson, him flourishing is just a reminder. Look, 2018 in the draft, the Giants did not draft a quarterback. They did the next year in Daniel Jones at 6. They had the second overall pick. They picked Saquon Barkley, obviously. Bad decision. He's turned into a great player, but again, um, they passed on Sam Darnold, Josh Allen. Everyone passed on Lamar Jackson, right, at 32. So they draft Daniel Jones the next year. So it's just instructive to say, like, look, you never know. I mean, they had an opportunity. Shoot, they had as good of an opportunity as anyone to draft Josh Allen. Okay, now was he considered the number 2 pick? No. But you know what? Teams get paid to evaluate, and a lot of teams missed on Josh Allen, including the Giants. A lot of teams, well, some, right? A lot of teams, not look. I mean, there were some teams there that weren't going to draft a quarterback, but a lot of teams missed on Lamar Jackson, and then away they went with Daniel Jones, and so these decisions, including like passing on Bo Nix last year, this year, will that wind up haunting the Giants because they're going into a 2025 draft that is not great for the quarterback position. Obviously, they were not in position to draft a quarterback in 2023 because they had won too much the previous year. But look, I mean, the fact that Nix was the 6th quarterback taken, he's looking pretty good so far. If he can keep it up, it'll be another lesson in that you don't need necessarily the top quarterback, right? Baker Mayfield, solid career. Sam Darnold now at third pick, solid career, right? We know Josh Rosen's done, is out of the league. Josh Allen, excellent career. He was a third quarterback off the board, and then Lamar Jackson, awesome career. So there's no telling. Like, we're looking at the draft and saying this is how it's going to unfold, right? The Giants could draft number one overall. They take Shedeur Sanders, and maybe the fourth quarterback, or say the third quarterback taken, say Jalen Milroe goes at the end of the round. No one knows. Like, again, like, what were people saying about Lamar Jackson leading into the draft? Come on, like, people were talking about him as potentially a wide receiver. So to sit here and talk about these guys in definitive terms, we should always look at this with that caveat. And I think Lamar Jackson coming here to play on Sunday is a good kind of news peg to remind people of that fact.
Yeah, you talk about the big what ifs. You mentioned what if they had taken, like, say, Josh Allen second overall, somebody like that, and got Nick Chubb? What would this offense look like? What would this organization be at right now? It's crazy when you just the whole what if game is kind of crazy. I mean, what if we know that division rivals have made trades in the past? Obviously, the Cowboys and the Eagles when Devontae Smith. Then they got Micah Parsons. Well, I mean, what if they offer the Eagles a package to move on? It's so many things that are what ifs as you just look at this thing go, this can be a lot better. They can be a lot much better situation in terms of that. It's one of the biggest questions we'll see, and we'll never know. And you just hope that when the Giants find themselves in the right position, they'll correct those things and actually pick the right people from here on out. Well, Darryl, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for talking to me, and thanks for joining. And thank you all out there for listening to this podcast. Once again, make sure to check Darryl's work and Ryan Novozinski's work on NJ.com/Giants. Even look at our social media as well too. If you check NJ.com, you follow that on Facebook, Twitter, or X, sorry, excuse me, Blue Sky, what have you. Make sure to check there because we see some of our workers on there as well too. So check that out, give it a read, and help support these guys out. So for Darryl, I'm Chris. Everybody have a good one. See ya.